Hi, welcome to Tinfoil Handkerchief Alignment, and today I'm going to talk about the fourth chakra, the heart, which is pretty self explanatory as far as physical location goes, but it's in the center of the chest. The heart chakra is the literal middle chakra and acts as a bridge between the more earthly lower chakras, the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, and then the more spiritual upper chakras of the throat, the third eye, and the crown. As you would probably expect, the heart chakra corresponds to how we love ourselves and others, balance change, and how we create healthy relationships with others, including how we show empathy, compassion, and forgiveness, and of course, love. It also represents how we perceive love, including how we perceive loving ourselves. A balanced heart chakra helps you feel more at ease and more internally peaceful. That can look like finding balance of equal give and take, learning the difference between empathy and sympathy, how we're able to forgive and move forward without resentment, and how we love ourselves and others unconditionally. Imbalances of those aspects in the sense of overactivity could look like neediness, people pleasing, being too trusting, overly empathetic in situations that don't necessarily deserve it, or being egocentric in ways that could look like vanity or excessive pride to the point of not being able to acknowledge any faults or shortcomings within self. Blockages of the heart chakra in these same aspects could look more like disdain or contempt for others, feelings more along the lines of self-loathing, low self-worth, or lack of confidence, apathy, which in turn often means being overly judgmental or holding grudges. Once you balance that within yourself, that will also exude externally. That's your aura. And it will precede you and it will look healthier than when you're being overly critical of yourself or others. I believe that we can't truly love someone else until we learn to love ourselves, giving some of our emotional energy to other people in ways that feel depleting, like connections that aren't intimate or emotionally fulfilling. For example, if your friend is always upset with their partner, they've had multiple discussions about what the issues are, but they never change and the cycle just constantly repeats for years. You can be the emotional ear, but there does come a time when it becomes pointless to even listen if they're not going to do anything to try to help themselves improve the situation, which some people may perceive as selfish, but I think of it as finding balance between emotional give and take. They have to be willing to heal aspects within themselves as well. Because generally, when it's a situation like that, there's an aspect within themselves that isn't healed, which is why they keep sticking in that toxic cycle. I long struggled with neediness and giving too much of myself to others. So it's a energetic boundary that I've really had to work on learning how to balance within myself. Though I did feel some guilt and a little like I was being selfish, I also had to take an honest look at whether or not the same people would be there for me in the same emotional capacity. In most cases, they couldn't when I needed less. So then it felt less selfish and more about conserving my energy for when I inevitably had to carry the weight of emotional burdens by myself. The funny thing is, even just from being able to discern that it was a drain on my energy helped me feel emotionally lighter, even though I was limiting myself to the weight I could share with others. But it's also my life, so I realized I don't need to share as much with others as I thought that I did. As far as how I'm feeling emotionally and what's going on in my personal life, I was an oversharer for a long time, and I definitely learned the benefit of not oversharing so much. And just because they're negative traits doesn't mean they always have to be negative traits either. If you acknowledge them and you work on them, you can better balance that out. So even if you are more predisposed to exhibiting some of the more negative traits, as long as you're mindful of it, you can rebalance that out so that you're more attuned to the positive aspects of it. For crystals to help balance or stimulate flow within the heart chakra, I normally use bloodstone. This is a bloodstone worry stone. They have a little groove for your thumb and you can just kind of rub it. I'll also use rose quartz. It just kind of depends on the application. I would probably use rose quartz for more of a love and relationship kind of healing, but bloodstone is actually like a super healing stone. It's supposed to correspond to the heart chakra, which is the circulatory system and our hearts, and it helps reduce some emotional stress while promoting a little bit more creativity. So it does kind of connect to, say, the sacral chakra in that way too. And it helps increase your overall vibration so that you're bringing a better version of yourself to your friendships and relationships. But again, I love these worry stones. My heart chakra has always been pretty blocked. So on days when I'm feeling attuned to the heart chakra becoming imbalanced a little bit, I'll usually just fiddle with it for a little bit. But love these. As for smells, I usually use rose or bergamot, but you can also use jasmine. I'll use rose or jasmine if I'm using bloodstone, but I'll use bergamot if I'm using a rose quartz, if that makes sense, just to bring about a little bit more balance. To help rebalance the heart chakra, you can use Yum or F sharp. Just be careful with the F sharp. It's common in breakup songs, but can also help with emotional balance, empathy, and immune system functionality. But I say it like that because it's easy to get stuck in a loop of ugly crying to breakup songs instead of looking back at a relationship with gratitude. Now, for those new to energy healing, it might surprise you to find that the color associated with the heart chakra is green. Pink is sort of associated to the heart chakra, but I would personally say it pertains more to love as a general emotion and not the actual heart chakra itself. Green is also interesting because different shades can also indicate, represent, or help with different things. Overall, greens can assist with balancing emotions and help us center ourselves, just as the heart chakra is the center of the body. The heart itself is associated with the sense of touch, which is mostly about physical sensations and connections. The heart chakra is ruled by the planet Venus. The planet of Venus is also representative of love, kindness, empathy, emotional balance, and artistic expression, and beautiful things, which also connects back to the lower chakras. The moon also represents some aspects of the heart chakra as it represents the astrological house of emotional foundations and home and family life. Rebalancing the heart chakra is essentially leveling our energetic foundation. The moon also represents honesty and how we perceive situations or project emotional reactions in various aspects or situations within our lives. Especially with it being the centermost chakra, balance and healthy energetic flow here would help heal and restore a healthy flow and connection of energy between the upper and lower chakras, which in turn improves the flow of all of the chakras overall, bringing an overall sense of calm, gratitude, and balance while helping you improve your level of emotional intelligence, which helps you raise the vibration within you and around you as you attune to more positive aspects of the heart chakra, such as love, kindness, empathy, compassion, and forgiveness. I don't believe you can truly love someone else fully unless you learn to love yourself fully first. Improving your emotional intelligence helps you understand others a lot better, which allows you to become more empathetic and compassionate. I think it's important to note here that there is a distinction between empathy and pity. Though it can be true, I don't actually see them as interchangeable. I think the confusion around the distinction between them, though, is why people are so emotionally confused in what it means to have healthy emotional support within relationships. It doesn't have to be in the romantic sense. I think it would be more prevalent maybe in friends and family when it comes to that. The way I see it is empathy is being able to understand the emotions someone is going through and even being inspired to help. But pity is being inspired to help just because you feel bad for someone. Feeling bad and looking down at someone, those are two different things as well. And I think some of the confusion around that is what makes a lot of people too proud to express their need for emotional support to those closest to them. But please know I say that because my life experience leads me to believe that a lot of people aren't as emotionally intelligent to provide genuine, authentic emotional support as they think they are. Or they say they are, but they're not really able to share that emotional load in the capacity that they often present that they are. Advice isn't emotional support, at least not the only means of it. And trust me, I say that as someone who's always offered like a personal anecdote or story to help let others know that I can empathize with them. Though sometimes this can be misinterpreted as me trying to make things about me, when that's not actually ever the intention, but it just goes to show that different people have different ideas of what giving or receiving emotional support looks like. What I've also found is a lot of people don't seem to be honest about what they need to feel emotionally supported either. From my perspective, I've found that it's often treated as a one-size-fits-all approach when it's not. We all have different emotional wounds or traumas based on our personal life experiences, and we all handle things differently. Those wounds often have a strong impact on the kind of emotional support we need, want, or are used to. Unless you're willing to be open and honest with yourself, let alone feel trusting enough to be that vulnerable within your other relationships, those that you would consider to be within your support system, so to speak, then resentments would build up eventually from not feeling listened to. That's why it's important to try to have an honest but constructive and healthy conversation about where you hurt and what being supported looks like to you. But I mean it in more of terms of emotional bandwidth, expectations, and boundaries within relationships, emotional and otherwise. And I say it like that because usually by the time it becomes resentment, I find many people are too embarrassed because it's often a buildup in a long-term relationship. And by the time it all kind of comes to a head, everyone just kind of feels silly they've never had that conversation, or just perceive it to be that the other doesn't care, which can contribute to growing apart, which you could also look at as emotionally closing off your heart to someone, which is essentially what starts to happen when the resentment starts to build up based on lack of emotional support or uneven perception dynamic, not even just as an uneven power dynamic. But if one partner looks at the other with pity, there will be resentment on both sides eventually, which is why open and honest dialogue is so important within relationships, and keeping your hearts open enough to each other to allow for learning and growth. But growth only happens if people are afforded the opportunity to correct their mistakes within the relationships as well. But further to that, they also have to be willing to actually correct their mistakes if they are being afforded those opportunities to do so. Sometimes with partners, friends, or whatever the connection, it's important to recognize when they just don't want to change either, where they aren't able to provide you with the emotional support. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just likely means it wasn't as strong of a connection as it once was, or that you thought it was. Usually when it gets to that point, the relationship isn't healthy or is more one-sided anyway. You can grow apart from someone, still be grateful for the time you spent together, and not hold any animosity towards them. I find animosity is usually just misplaced resentment, which can start to feel heavy if you carry it around for too long. But after a relationship ends, you don't need to hold on to that resentment because you're not as immersed in that relationship as you once were. I will say that I do think a lot of people don't want to be the one to end a relationship, and usually even if someone gathers the confidence, a lot of it actually has to do with anticipated reaction of the other person. So I find that people usually intentionally push each other away so they can have this spicy fight to give it an excuse to separate. But I also think that if you address issues as they arise through honest, open, and constructive conversation, those resentments don't build up because you're talking them out, right? It allows you both the opportunity to learn and grow together. If only one person is growing, there is going to be a level of resentment on both ends. I think trying to have a healthy and constructive conversation is one of the best ways to bring out people's true colors because it shows how they handle criticism. Even if you're not being overly critical, constructive conversations are generally ways a person or a situation could improve, and I find many people perceive that to be a slight or a judgment rather than a suggestion. When it's perceived as a judgment, though, the person feeling judged often starts feeling defensive, which in turn either turns into a big blame game of, oh yeah, well, you did this and that bothers me, but I don't say anything, or this is just how I am. If someone is willing to be open, honest, and loving of you enough to help you improve your personal shortcomings so that maybe they're not shortcomings, then maybe it's worth being open to listening to what they have to say and being honest with yourself as to whether or not it's true before it turns into a resentment on either part. If they're bringing it up, it's because it's bothering them. You don't have to fully change, but a compromise is probably going to prevent resentment. You just kind of get afforded more leniency in a situation for learning and growing within those relationships, I find. Still doesn't mean you have to agree, but then maybe the question should be whether or not it's a healthy connection and why you're participating in or as close to it as you are. And there is a difference in just being judgmental or a nag and expressing feelings in a healthy, constructive way. If nothing you do seems to be good enough, even if you are trying, then maybe it's more healthy for you to distance yourself a little bit from that relationship. It's not that the person is a bad person, it's just that you're recognizing the drain on your energy that it can be. Because if you're always feeling like you need to do something to impress someone who's never going to be impressed, that is a drain on your energy. Why don't you focus it on yourself and something that you love? And why does that person come down on you so hard anyway? And why do you keep going back and seeking advice from that person if that's all they do, kind of thing? Again, it goes back to the heart chakra in a sense of when you learn to love yourself, you're better able to discern at what point, when it stops being constructive criticism and it starts being more nitpicking just for the sake of looking for something to be wrong with it. Because if they love you, they should be able to be happy and supportive for you instead of trying to tear you down. Again, that doesn't have to be any dramatic thing, and you also don't have to ghost anyone, but you should also be able to be upfront with someone if you're that close to them. And maybe that's just me and the way that I empathize, but I think being honest with people allows them the opportunity to choose whether or not they want to grow, but at very least doesn't leave them guessing about why that relationship soured or ended. I find more people are able to heal quicker and better, or even just correct their mistakes or annoyances, even if it's just for the next relationship, if they're actually aware of what the real issues are. That's why I don't like the "it's not you, it's me" thing, because to me that's sort of like a cop-out. If it's me, tell me it's me. You know what I mean? Because if you're so bothered by something that I do, but you're not actually directly telling me what it is that I'm doing that's bothering you, then how am I able to fix that so that it doesn't bother you? You know, that's just the way I see it. In addition to apathy, pessimism, and being overly critical, other difficulties within relationships that can be indicators of imbalances within the heart chakra can look like jealousy, possessiveness, or codependency. But it can also look like being vengeful or petty. In terms of overactivity when it comes to the heart chakra, I think the core of it is having a lot of love to give and it being directed to people or situations that don't have the same capacity for love or emotional support or the same understanding of it, at least not at the same time. When I think of love in terms of blockages, I think more about unrequited feelings, inability to improve the health of a toxic relationship, or difficulties letting go of a relationship, which I ultimately feel is usually based on when there is an energetic mismatch in capacity to love and individual perception of self-worth. Like I said in the sacral chakra episode, and how intimate moments can be full body connection points both internally and externally, which impacts the exchange of energy within that moment, usually in the form of energetic depletion. Blood similarly works the same way, but internally. So think of it as blockages within the heart chakra essentially cause poor energetic circulation within your body. For me personally, my heart chakra functions a lot better when I'm around authentic connections and people who actually love and care about me. Like I said though, it's all about finding balance and every situation is different. Physically, mentally, and spiritually, functionality of our heart chakra is vital to our overall health and can ultimately impact our perception of our own self-worth. Imbalances increase the sense of brokenness or missing pieces within us. Improving our energetic flow just means our internal internal energy is able to find a healthy pace with no obstructions internally. A healthy balance between over and under stimulation within each chakra, which again, I personally feel like a lot of that comes from doing the shadow work of healing your previous emotional and physical traumas. Also, just for clarification and as a reminder, shadow work is just an easier way of saying healing aspects within self. It's about honest internal communication with yourself of where you hurt and what negative feelings you're feeling or holding on to. Once you understand why you hurt, you're better able to understand your feelings and reactions, and the better able you can be at channeling those in a healthy, positive way. As I've said before, as we work to heal those holes within self, negative energetic attachments don't stick to us. And then you're better able to maintain a more balanced energetic baseline even through more challenging times. Just because you feel broken doesn't mean you can't heal those pieces within yourself. From personal experience, I started feeling more whole, even though on a material level, I had much less and was in worse circumstances. But I try my best to keep my heart thawed out and not let it get hardened by unfortunate circumstances. All I can do is continue to proceed with good intentions, love, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, and hope it'll all work out one day. And I hope that it inspires more people to give love back to others as well. I've said before that I treat others the way I want to be treated and not the way they treat me. I try to show empathy and compassion despite rarely being shown any. But because I've healed a lot of those aspects within myself, I understand that a lot of what's happened to me is projections and unhealed spaces within other people that's preventing that. I also look at it like maybe they've never really been shown empathy and compassion, let alone healthy and truly unconditional love. So I do my best to show what that actually looks like. Now, I'm sure there's probably some confusion as to how someone who's never been truly loved can truly love. But just because some people don't have the capacity to love me, it doesn't mean I don't still have a great capacity for love. I know how to give the things that I've never been given because I know what lacking them feels like. Having empathy is not wanting anyone else to feel that way. Compassion is understanding that sometimes forgiveness helps heal more than just ourselves. And I do think a lot of it has to do with learning to love myself and healing aspects within myself, which helped me with my discernment in being able to recognize what negative emotions were being projected on me from others that I was just believing, and what were actually mine that I was carrying from past traumas where I either didn't understand my feelings about the situation or acknowledge them for a long time. And mostly that was because I didn't have enough discernment to recognize the things that actually hurt me weren't the surface level situations. And as I've said before, the more healing you do within yourself, the more you're able to truly understand that for the most part, how other people treat you speaks more to who they are than it does about you. If you have good intentions, show empathy, love, compassion, and forgiveness, find a balance in that through a functioning heart chakra, it's much easier to discern what's really yours to heal. I also think that a primary cause of blockages within the heart chakra just comes from us not loving ourselves unconditionally enough to believe that someone else will, more than anything, which prevents true trust without fear because it's kind of like lying by omission. If you can't be honest with yourself, how can you be honest with someone else? Just like if you can't love yourself, how do you expect someone else to be able to love you? And some of that, as it pertains to loving yourself, is a matter of what you tolerate as well. If you have low self-worth, you're likely to tolerate more disrespect within your own relationship. And again, I'm not saying that in a this is just who I am and you can't change me kind of way, because that in itself is more representative of a blockage within the heart chakra. I'm saying that because to me, it's more about showing myself grace as I learn and heal from situations it took me a long time to be willing to look at from an honest perspective, or in some cases, I was not aware of. But at least I try to heal, and when I know better, I try to do better. When I learned to love myself, it also set a higher standard for what I was looking for in a partner. Not in the superficial aspects of money and lifestyle. I had been allowing myself to be devalued and disrespected for a long time within my own intimate connections. When I loved myself, my self-worth increased, and I was no longer willing to stay in draining situations just for the illusion of love, when mostly it just made me feel degraded, especially not just to say I'm in a relationship or to have a connection. To me, that's just not authentic. A lot of people absolutely don't understand that how despite this, I don't feel lonely. But as I've said in previous episodes, learning to love myself meant learning to enjoy my own company. I like to believe that my current capacity for love is indicative of a healthy functioning heart chakra. So even just as myself, I feel more whole, because I'm not looking for things that I feel like I'm missing within myself, within other people. I'm working to build that within myself so that I can be the best version of myself. So it's not like I don't still have work to maintain balancing aspects within myself. That's why I think it's important to always show ourselves some grace as long as we're trying to do better. More consistency means more understanding from me, personally. I will reiterate that my personal opinion is that to balance your heart chakra, you have to love yourself before you can truly love anyone else. But a lot of that comes with showing ourselves as much empathy, compassion, love, and forgiveness as we show others. Small steps still make progress, and they get a lot further than the people who spend more time focusing on the destination and being overwhelmed by the distance. Usually starting is the hardest part. Understanding how to love others comes from understanding how our perception of it is shaped by our own life experiences, which can, in turn, skew our perception on what our actual capability to love is beyond a superficial level. I would also be inclined to say that the more superficial the basis would probably indicate the level of severity of a heart chakra blockage. But that's just a personal theory. So I hope you've enjoyed this overview of the heart chakra. If you're interested in booking any personal services with me, check out my Etsy shop or check out my other YouTube channel, Tinfoil Handkerchief Tarot. Until next time, keep the peace.